Washington, D.C., October 13th, 1792.
Lower the stone!
A group of Freemasons perform a sacred ceremony in which they lay the first stone used in the construction of the White House. The large stone is intended to be the foundation of the southeast corner of the building and is referred to as the Cornerstone.
When the White House Cornerstone was dedicated, there was corn, wine, and oil poured on top of it. It's the corn of nourishment, the wine of refreshment, and the oil of joy. And that really expresses the hopes of the Masons involved for the success of not only that building, but what it represents, the system of government, and by extension, the nation.
Wine, please.
It's believed that as part of the ceremony, the Freemasons placed objects of great importance in a time capsule that was put inside a compartment located within the Cornerstone. For centuries, historians have wondered what the Founding Fathers may have hidden in the White House Cornerstone.
We know that the Freemasons put time capsules in other buildings and monuments. And since this was the cornerstone of the president's house, that they might have put something very important in there. One of the things that has been speculated is that they would have had some alternate versions of founding documents of America, like a version of the Constitution that also included in it the Masons' vision of how the nation was supposed to proceed.
An alternate version of the Constitution placed in the cornerstone of the White House? But what reason is there to think that this document existed?
Something that often gets lost in the shuffle in the whole history of the Revolution is that the Constitution and the Republic it created wasn't the first iteration. So what actually came out of the Revolution were the Articles of Confederation, which from 1781 to 1789 were actually what governed the new country. But the Articles of Confederation didn't work, and so they came up with a Constitution. But it's Plan B. The other thing you often have to take into account is there were contentious factions among the Founding Fathers. They did not all get along. There were bitter arguments between them. And so was there an alternative Constitution? That's certainly quite possible.
Legally, a different version of the Constitution wouldn't mean anything. The Constitution we have is the one that was ratified by the states. Historically, it could be utterly fascinating. It could be earth-shattering in terms of our understanding about what the intent was for the nation. The thing is, we don't know. So you can see why people want to find a cornerstone. It's because they want to know what's in there and what that would mean.
But if there might have been an alternate version of the Constitution hidden in the White House Cornerstone, then it naturally begs the question, why hasn't anyone checked to see if it's really there? Well, as it turns out, people have tried to do just that. But curiously, the cornerstone of the White House has never been found.
The cornerstone was supposed to be in the southeast corner of the White House, and the ceremony was reported on, and then that cornerstone has never been seen since. It seems to have just kind of disappeared from history. So it leaves you the question, where is it?
For more than 200 years, historians have speculated as to where the cornerstone of the White House is located. In fact, when the White House was completely gutted for renovation work during the 1940s, President Harry Truman took the opportunity to order a thorough search for the elusive cornerstone.
When Truman had the White House rebuilt or refurbished in the 1950s, they found a lot of stones with Masonic emblems on them. And being an active Freemason, in fact, he was the Grand Master Masons in Missouri. He had one of these stones sent to each of the Grand Lodges. We have one at the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. It's a stone that has a Masonic mark on it. But for the cornerstone, who knows?
Truman very much searched for that cornerstone, and they've never found it. If the cornerstone is still there, it has never been discovered. But maybe it's hidden somewhere and could still be found.
Alaska. Here among the rugged mountains, dense forests, and towering glaciers, lies a mysterious stretch of wilderness where more than 16,000 people have gone missing since 1988. Locals refer to this area as the Alaska Triangle.
The Alaska Triangle stretches from Juneau in the south to Anchorage in the middle, all the way up to Yukiavik at the most northern point in Alaska. Like other triangle areas of the world, planes will crash, people will go missing, but the Alaska Triangle seems to be more volatile than other areas of the world.
You have to remember that Alaska has some of the most notoriously difficult terrain, weather, and it has the highest number of private planes anywhere in the United States. So in one sense, it's not surprising they have a number of people that go missing there. In another sense, it's quite fantastic when you look at the stories behind the missing.
In January 1950, a Douglas C-54D Skymaster, taking off from Elmendorf Air Force Base, was headed toward Montana. It was a beautiful day, only a few clouds in the sky, yet just as it passed over into Yukon territory, the Air Force lost complete radio contact with it. Both United States and Canadian military forces teamed up, about 7,000 personnel, scanning 350,000 square miles of territory for this missing airplane, and couldn't find a thing. But what's even stranger is just 2 weeks later, a smaller plane went down in the same area. They were able to find that immediately. Yet the larger airplane, the Skymaster, they've never been able to find a thing. It completely disappeared.
When you look at the Alaska Triangle, one of the few times a search and rescue person has ever disappeared was an individual named Gerald DeBerry. And he was on a search outside of Fairbanks, and he was on an ATV, and he never showed back up after the search. The Alaska State Troopers bring canines in, the canines can't find a scent. They bring professional trackers in, they can't find tracks. And strangely, they couldn't find the ATV. It was a year later, a hiker finds the ATV, engines turned off, and the Alaska State Troopers went in and did another massive search. He's never been found.
The number of people that are reported missing in Alaska every year is twice as high as the national average. But can all of these disappearances be explained by Alaska's unforgiving wilderness? It's possible, but there are those who believe that something more extraordinary may be taking place. And as evidence, they point to stories in local folklore that describe strange creatures suddenly appearing out of thin air.
Alaska is an area where there are many unknowns, many mysteries, and there are very common stories of what you might call monsters and the like. One of the very compelling examples actually comes from the Kenai Peninsula, in the southern part of it. There's an abandoned town called Portlock. It was a cannery town, a very successful one early on, but it started getting terrorized by a monster. And so this monster would attack people, kill people, to the point where by 1950, the entire town was abandoned. This creature was identified as the Nantiak. Nantiak can be thought of very much in the sort of wider tradition of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, somewhere on the slippery slope between man and creature.
Some people have suggested that these are entities that live between worlds, that they come through portals and they return back through portals. What this world is they come from, we don't know, but they're rarely seen. They often disappear into thin air. So there is a good chance that it's not just that people get lost in the wilderness, but actually they're being transported with these beings to other realms.
Could strange creatures really be traveling to the Alaska Triangle from other realms? While such an idea may sound like a far-fetched fantasy, many researchers claim that it's entirely possible. because scientists have discovered that there are numerous geological anomalies found throughout this mysterious area.
The land in Alaska is extremely volatile. The U.S. Department of the Interior did a geological survey in the area and discovered negative magnetic anomalies that are prevalent in the area. They can wreak havoc with guidance systems, compasses, all kinds of electronic equipment that can cause planes and other vessels to go missing or crash. And there are theories that these anomalies can spawn portals, these doorways into other dimensions.
While geological activity in Alaska is known to cause magnetic anomalies, could it also be creating portals in this area, as some believe? At the moment, we can't say for sure. But one thing is certain. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people continue to mysteriously disappear in the Alaska Triangle every year. Eastern Ohio, 1994. Bigfoot researcher Matt Moneymaker and a colleague are investigating reported Bigfoot sightings in a wooded area near the town of Kent. After spending years pursuing Bigfoot in hopes of seeing one himself, Matt is eager to find out whether there really is a giant creature in these woods.
We were staked out along a road. The guy I was with was about 60 feet away. And at about 2:30 a.m., something comes walking down the road.
I see something.
He sees it first through night vision.
Matt rushes over to investigate and is stopped dead in his tracks by the sound of inhuman growling.
This thing steps out, a very big, tall, hair-covered thing, standing out there, growling at me. When you've got something that big, that close to you, you could see it well enough to know that must be a Bigfoot. So I just kind of backed out and walked away. I was pretty happy at that point because I'm thinking, if this one's gonna do that reliably, then this is a place that we're gonna get some video footage of them if we're coming here with the right kind of gear.
But when Matt returned with camera equipment to document the encounter, the creature had vanished. Although Matt was not able to photograph the large, hairy beast that he witnessed, he remains convinced that what he saw was, in fact, Bigfoot.
It's one of those things that sounds so over the top, but after I had a face-to-face encounter, I knew it was exactly the same thing that all the witnesses around there had described.
If these sightings are of a real creature, then what exactly is Bigfoot? And how did this phenomenon begin?
Bigfoot is generally reported to be a very large, very furry, hominid creature. Something like a person, but not a person. Seen very often remotely in the forest, and with various stories about sightings or about footprints that really are pretty widespread in many, many communities in the United States and in Canada.
Before 1958, people didn't use the word Bigfoot. But it was in 1958 in Northern California, guys building a road found footprints around their gear when they would come back in the morning, and a guy named Jerry Crew made plaster footprints of these tracks and showed them to a reporter in Eureka, and they dubbed it Bigfoot. That was where the name first originated and got into American vocabulary.
I grew up in Washington State, where it's hard to underestimate Bigfoot's power. Bigfoot is the mascot of different companies. Bigfoot is all over billboards. As a young boy in Washington State, I fully believed in Bigfoot's existence.
In 1967, interest in Bigfoot surged when an investigator named Roger Patterson captured incredible footage of a creature that matched the description of Bigfoot near Bluff Creek in northern California.
One of the issues when it comes to people believing in Bigfoot existing is, let's face it, mainstream science has shone away from this topic. However, amateur researchers are trying to pick up the slack, bridge that gap between amateur and mainstream science.
Bigfoot researchers claim that the vast majority of Bigfoot sightings are sincere and that hoaxes represent only a small fraction of reports. They also point out that stories of Bigfoot-like animals are not merely a recent fad. Believe it or not, more than 3,000 years ago, the ancient Babylonians told stories of a creature that sounds an awful lot like Bigfoot, except they called it Enkidu.
Enkidu is a hairy, wild man creature with super strength, and he's fearsome. He's ready and willing to defend this wild territory that he inhabits. The king Gilgamesh becomes his soulmate, basically, best friends. So this king becomes this amazing hero through his relationship with this wild man that has shown him how to negotiate the boundaries between humanity and wildness.
Since that time, descriptions of so-called wild men, half human, half ape beasts, have popped up throughout history all over the world.
In the Caucasus, there was something called the Alma that was a big monster, a nature creature. In Australia, there's the Aboriginal version, which they call it a yowie. There is the Yeti in the Himalayas. So there are local variations, but the story is more or less the same. Very big, seemingly animal-like, or is it human, or is it some hybrid? There's the point.
In North America, there are Native American legends that go back centuries, long before the discoveries made by Jerry Crew or Roger Patterson.
We know that Sasquatch, the preeminent Bigfoot creature that we have in the United States, located in the Pacific Northwest, that very word, Sasquatch, comes from a Salish tribal word that means wild man or hairy man.
The natives of the Northwest say that there are creatures that walk upright and only at night and can speak in their language.
I found in speaking with indigenous peoples that they don't describe them as an animal at all. They call them the first ones or the old ones. These were the tribe that was here before we got here.
Liverpool, England. This historic port city is famously known as the hometown of the Beatles. But over the years, it has gained a much stranger reputation. It is said that in Liverpool, time moves in mysterious ways. And it's become ground zero for a phenomenon known as time slips, which are a kind of accidental time travel.
In Liverpool, there's a shopping street called Bowl Street, which has become infamous for time slips. One of these time slips involved a police officer called Frank, who was out shopping with his wife, Carol, in July 1996. And Carol went to the Dillon's bookstore, and he went to a shop to buy a CD, a compact disc, 1990s technology. Now, he then returned to meet up with his wife, but the bookstore where his wife was, Dillon's, had now become Cripps and was selling women's clothing and handbags. Now, this confused Frank, who then looked around and found that everybody around him was dressed inexplicably in 1940s, 1950s fashion. And he became rapidly aware that he was no longer in the 1990s. He was somewhere very, very different.
And everything then just changes back to how it should be. The bookshop is there, which he knows to be Dillon's, but he remembered the name of that shop, and it was Cripps. And there was indeed a shop in the 1950s at that location by the name Cripps. Is it possible that there are places in this world where space-time works differently to anywhere else?
Recently, time slips have been entering the news. The fact that here you are at one point in space, and then suddenly time has a mistake in it, which allows you to slip right through a crack in the fabric of space and time.
There is a big difference between a time slip and the use of a time machine. In a time machine, you have control over your comings and goings along the timeline. With a time slip, one ends up in the future, or possibly the past, without any idea of how you got there, or any control of being there.
Curiously, time slips have also been reported on the sites of historic battlegrounds.
Another very interesting account of a time slip occurs in 1932 when two journalists went to the Hamburg shipyard to cover a story. A gentleman by the name of J. Bernard Hutton and another gentleman by the name of Brandt. Nothing out of the ordinary took place until suddenly they found themselves in the midst of bombs being dropped all around them. They could see actually bombs falling out of the sky. And obviously this was something that terrified them, and they got out of there quickly.
When they looked back from Hamburg to the shipyards, they appeared to be intact and unharmed. And when Brandt's photographs were developed, again, there was no damage to the shipyards. Fast forward to 1943, and Hutton was living in Britain during the Second World War. He read a report of an RAF raid on that shipyard, a bombing raid by the Royal Air Force. And the description in the newspaper matched exactly what he'd seen on that day in 1932, and chilled him to the bone.
If there is some truth to these time slip reports, then what could be causing them? Well, according to physicists, the answer could be that we're living in what's referred to as the multiverse.
The idea of the multiverse comes from the quantum theory. You know, when we were children, we were told that you cannot be two places at the same time. That's just common sense, right? Well, we lied to you. In the quantum theory, electrons can in fact be two places at the same time. Therefore, we have the scenario where the past, the present, the future are all mixed up into one. So, in principle, the theory allows you to simultaneously exist with somebody from the past.
What are we to make of people coming forward and claiming these time slips, whether they be into the past or into the future? And I think what we can say is that there are so many of these stories that there must be some kind of truth to them.
Damascus, Syria, June 18, 1812. Swiss explorer and geographer Johann Ludwig Borchardt sets off on an incredible journey across the desert to uncover the secrets of the Middle East. During his travels, Borchardt heard rumors of a mysterious ancient city known as Petra that was hidden somewhere in the deserts of Jordan. For centuries, the exact location of Petra was kept secret from foreigners. But Johann Borchardt was determined to see Petra with his own eyes, and so he hatched a wild plan.
The area had always shown conflict. It had always shown a certain amount of hostility to European visitors. And so Borchardt spent months in the region learning the local dialect of Arabic, and then perfected a Bedouin outfit to look like a local or something close. The disguise was needed to get him in the door.
After spending months following clues in search of the city, Borchardt traveled through a dark, narrow desert canyon, and to his astonishment, stumbled upon the stunning ruins of Petra, which were even more impressive than he had imagined. Borchardt was the first European to lay eyes on Petra in more than 500 years, and his vivid account of the city made headlines around the world.
Suddenly the world reads about Petra. The entrance into Petra is this magnificent carved structure about 140 feet high. And it was carved, it was hewn directly out of the rock. And that's the beginning. Petra was a large city of 30 to 50,000 people that was thriving between about 500 BC and about 500 AD. It had a city center, it had a main street, it had everything you would think of, even to this day, that a large city would have.
The builders of Petra were the Nabateans. They were a culture in their own right who adopted the art and architecture of the Greek Hellenic world, the Greco-Roman world, but also had influences from Assyria in what is today Iraq. And they blended all of this together to create the incredible carved architecture that you see at Petra.
The more than 800 carved structures at Petra are so iconic that in 2007, the site was named one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Ever since Petra was revealed in 1812, historians have wondered what could have caused the collapse of such a prosperous city. For decades, it was thought that shifting trade routes were responsible. But research conducted by archaeologist Thomas Paradise has revealed new information regarding the downfall of Petra.
We're really fortunate that we keep putting pieces of the puzzle together using archaeological excavation, using GIS and laser technology. We're starting to put these pieces together to understand Petra. New research is indicating that a large flood hit in the 5th century that wiped out the downtown for at least a year or so. The city rebuilds after that flood, but it marks the beginning of the decline from its golden age.
The rediscovery of Petra has revealed that the city was important not just historically, but also spiritually. Because as it turns out, this ancient city has a connection to the Bible.
Up above Petra, and it's visible from most parts of Petra, is a mountain called Jebel Harun. Jebel Harun means the mountain of Aaron. And we do know, legend says, that's where Moses' brother Aaron is buried. Below a large tomb on the top of the mountain, the keeper of the holy site at Jebel Harun, over the years, I came to know his family. So he invited us up there to go into the building itself and then to climb into the tomb. That gets you excited because you realize you're part of a tradition from 3,000 years of pilgrimage. Petra's been called the lost city of stone because here we see a city of 30 to 50,000 people that slowly fades from the history books over time. And what we're going to find out about Petra in the future is probably more incredible than what we already have uncovered.